I never thought I'd be the type of woman to live a double life. If you met me, you'd probably think I was the most ordinary suburban wife and mother in the world. I'm 34, married for 11 years to my husband, Mark, and we have 2 kids, Evan, 9, and Chloe, 6. We live in a nice, quiet neighborhood in upstate New York. I bake for the PTA, volunteer at the library, keep the lawn neat, and wave to the neighbors when I take the trash out. But for the last year and a half, I've been keeping a secret. It all started in the most harmless way, at least, that's what I told myself at first. I reconnected with an old college friend, Aaron, through Facebook. We'd been in the same literature seminar back in the day, but nothing romantic had ever happened between us. He was just the sarcastic, funny guy who always had a coffee in hand and somehow still managed to ace every essay. When his friend request popped up, I didn't think twice. We started chatting about nostalgia stuff, professors we hated, that one bar in town that sold dollar shots on Thursdays. How weird it felt that our 20s were gone. But as the weeks passed, the messages shifted. He'd ask what I was wearing while I made dinner. He'd tell me about his workouts. He'd send photos that weren't technically explicit, but made my heart race anyway. I told myself it was just harmless flirting. Mark was often busy with work, traveling for conferences or holed up in his home office late into the night. Our intimacy had dwindled into quick, routine encounters that felt more like maintenance than passion. I figured a little banter with Aaron was just a way to feel attractive again. But then Aaron came to town for a business trip. He asked if I wanted to grab coffee, like old times. I said yes. I still remember walking into that cafe and seeing him after all those years. He looked older, sure, but in that good way men sometimes do, broad shoulders, a little salt in his hair, and that same smirk that made you feel like you were in on some secret. We talked for over 2 hours, and when I finally stood to leave, he leaned in and kissed me on the cheek. Just the cheek, but I felt it all the way down my spine. That night, lying in bed next to Mark, I couldn't stop replaying the meeting. The way Aaron had looked at me, like I was the only woman in the room. The way my hand brushed his when we both reached for the sugar packet. The way I felt alive. Our messages became more frequent, more intense. Soon we weren't just talking about what ifs. We were making plans. And 2 months later, I found myself checking into a hotel under the name Claire Hudson, with my heart pounding so hard I thought the receptionist could hear it. When Aaron knocked on the door, I almost didn't open it, but I did. And that was the night my double life began. That first night with Aaron is etched into my memory with a kind of dangerous clarity. I can recall the soft hum of the hotel's air conditioner, the faint smell of his cologne, and how my hand shook when he stepped inside. We didn't rush. He poured us wine from a bottle he'd brought, and we sat on the bed talking, like we were back in college. But there was an undercurrent to every word, a tension that pulled us closer until there was no space left to close. When it finally happened, it wasn't just physical. It felt like something in me had been reawakened. For the first time in years, I wasn't a wife, or a mom, or someone's dependable, predictable partner. I was a woman who could make someone's breath catch just by leaning in. The next morning, I went home like nothing had happened. Mark was making pancakes with Chloe, and Evan was still in pajamas watching cartoons. I kissed my kids on the head, poured myself coffee, and joined the chaos of the kitchen. No one suspected a thing. At first, Aaron and I kept our meetings rare, maybe once every couple of months, always in different hotels, always under fake names. But the space between them started to shrink. We'd make up excuses. He had client visits. I had weekend book club retreats. My phone was suddenly full of secret apps and hidden message threads. I became skilled at deleting evidence, at timing my showers so I could wash off any trace of his scent before Mark noticed. It wasn't just the sex, though that was intense and addictive. Aaron knew how to talk to me in a way Mark hadn't in years. He asked about my dreams, my fears, my regrets. He'd send me songs to listen to when I was having a bad day, or an article he thought I'd like. He noticed things, like when I cut my hair, or bought a new dress, and made sure to tell me how good I looked. One night, after we'd been together for almost a year, Aaron said something that scared me. You know, if you wanted, I could give you more than just hotel rooms. I laughed it off, but inside, my heart lurched. I had never thought seriously about leaving Mark. This was supposed to be my escape, not my new life. But the more Aaron slipped into my world, the more I started to imagine it, what it would be like to wake up next to him, instead of Mark. The danger of being caught was part of the thrill, but it was also getting riskier. Mark had started to notice little things, like how I sometimes dressed up for errands, or how I was glued to my phone at odd hours. He never accused me outright, but I could feel the questions hanging in the air between us. And then something happened that forced me to confront the reality of what I'd been doing. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon. I was driving home from one of my coffee dates with Aaron when I saw Mark's car parked 2 blocks from the hotel. My first instinct was denial. There was no way Mark could be here by coincidence, but there was also no way he knew, right? My mind raced through every possible scenario as I drove past, pretending not to notice the familiar silver SUV. His car was empty, wipers still swiping back and forth in the rain, which meant he was somewhere nearby, possibly in the hotel I just left. I didn't go home right away. I pulled into a grocery store parking lot, sat there gripping the steering wheel, and tried to steady my breathing. I replayed the past few weeks in my head. Had I been careless? Had Aaron or I left something behind in a room? 30 minutes later, I finally forced myself to drive home. Mark was there, sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling on his phone like nothing had happened. He glanced up, smiled faintly, and asked if I could help Chloe with her math homework. No mention of the hotel, no strange looks, but something was different in his eyes. The following days were torture. Mark didn't act angry, but he was watchful. He'd ask little questions about my day, where I went, who I saw. He started texting me during the hours he knew I'd usually be free. When I was with Aaron, I found myself glancing at my phone constantly, afraid Mark would somehow know where I was. Aaron, meanwhile, brushed it all off. He doesn't know. And even if he did, what's he going to do? You're not a prisoner, Claire. But I wasn't convinced. 2 weeks later, the confrontation came, but not in the way I expected. I was getting ready for bed when Mark walked in holding a manila envelope. He set it on the dresser and just stood there. Open it, he said quietly. Inside were photos, grainy, taken from a distance, but unmistakable. Me and Aaron walking into a hotel. Me and Aaron kissing in the parking lot. Me leaving the hotel alone, looking over my shoulder. I hired someone, Mark said, his voice steady but low. I needed to know if I was losing my mind. I couldn't speak. My throat felt like it was closing. I haven't decided what I'm going to do yet, he continued. But you're going to tell me the truth. All of it. Now. I wanted to lie, to minimize, to spin a story that made me less guilty. But the look in his eyes told me he already knew everything. So I told him. Not every detail, God. Not the details. But enough that he understood it wasn't just a one-time thing. When I finished, he didn't yell. He didn't cry. He just said, I'll sleep in the guest room. And then he walked out. For the first time since this all began, I realized the fantasy might be over. But what I didn't know then was that Mark had no intention of letting it end quietly. The next few days were suffocating. Mark didn't speak to me unless it was about the kids or something logistical, bills, groceries, schedules. His tone was polite, even calm, but the distance between us felt like a canyon. Aaron noticed the change almost immediately. You're quieter lately, he said during one of our hurried phone calls. I think Mark knows everything, I admitted. Then maybe it's time to stop hiding, he said. We could make this official. But the idea of my entire life blowing up, my kids, my house, the community we'd built, sent a wave of panic through me. I told him I needed time to think. Then, one evening, after the kids were asleep, Mark knocked on my bedroom door. He walked in holding his phone, sat on the edge of the bed, and said, I want you to hear something. He pressed play. Aaron's voice filled the room, clear as day, from one of our phone calls. He was saying my name, talking about the last time we'd met, describing in vivid detail things that made my stomach twist. Where did you get this? I stammered. I've had your phone tapped for months, Mark said. His voice was still calm, but his eyes were cold. And not just your phone. He explained that he'd installed a small GPS tracker in my car, one I'd driven around with for nearly a year without noticing. He had audio from hotels, screenshots of messages I thought I'd deleted, even a photo of Aaron and me holding hands in a bookstore 3 towns over. You think I'm stupid, Claire? He asked. No, I've been waiting, watching, building a file. I felt my chest tighten. Why? If you knew, why didn't you say anything sooner? Because I wanted options, he said simply. And now I have them. That night, I didn't sleep. My mind kept circling the same questions. What did he mean by options? Was he going to divorce me? Blackmail me? Tell the kids? The answer came 2 days later, and it was something I never could have predicted. Mark sat me down in the kitchen, slid a printed document across the table, and said, I'm not divorcing you yet, but you're going to do exactly what I say from now on. I looked down at the paper. It wasn't a divorce filing. It was an agreement. Rules. Conditions. Every part of my daily life laid out in black and white. Where I could go, who I could see, even what time I had to be home. And at the bottom, in bold letters, if you break any of these terms, I will send everything I have to everyone we know. I stared at the document, my hands trembling. It was surreal. Like I'd stepped into some twisted alternate reality. Mark wasn't just angry. He was in control now, and he knew it. The rules were humiliating in their precision. I was to cut off all contact with Aaron immediately. My phone and laptop passwords would be changed, and Mark would have full access. I could not leave the house without telling him exactly where I was going and when I would return. I had to attend weekly marriage counseling sessions that he alone would choose. And most disturbing of all, he reserved the right to check in on me at any time, without warning. I wanted to scream at him, tear the paper in half, tell him I wouldn't be treated like some prisoner in my own home. But the image of those photos, the recordings, the messages, all of it spreading to my family, my friends, even our children, it was enough to crush my defiance. So I signed. The next few weeks were suffocating. Mark monitored my calls, read my texts, and even followed me once when I went to the grocery store, just to see if I'd notice. Every moment of my day felt like it belonged to him. Aaron, meanwhile, didn't understand. He kept sending messages from new numbers, leaving voicemails from blocked ids. "You can't just disappear," he said in one message. "We're not done." I ignored them at first, but late at night, when Mark was asleep, I'd listen to his voice, and ache for the freedom I'd had, even if it was built on lies. Then, one night, Aaron showed up outside my house. It was nearly midnight when I heard the tap on my bedroom window. My heart nearly stopped when I saw his face in the dark. I cracked the window just enough to whisper, "What are you doing here?" "I had to see you," he said, his voice urgent. "You're not answering me. What's going on?" I told him about the photos, the recordings, the rules. He cursed under his breath, and said, "Then come with me tonight. We can leave now." For a second, I almost said yes. I could picture it, throwing a bag together, running into the night, never looking back. But then I thought about the fallout. The kids, my parents, everyone seeing exactly what I'd been doing for the last year. "I can't," I whispered. Aaron's face hardened. "Then you're letting him own you." Before I could answer, I heard footsteps in the hallway. Mark. The door to my bedroom swung open so fast it slammed into the wall. Mark stood there, wearing a t-shirt and pajama pants, but his eyes were wide awake, sharp, cold, and fixed on Aaron outside the window. For a second, no one moved. The only sound was the steady patter of rain against the glass. "What the hell are you doing here?" Mark's voice was low, dangerous. Aaron didn't flinch. "Talking to your wife." Mark stepped forward, his gaze shifting to me. "Close the window, Claire." "Now." I froze. My hands felt like they weighed 100 pounds. Aaron's jaw tightened. "She's not your prisoner," he said. "You can't." Mark cut him off. "I can. And I do. And if you know what's good for you, you'll walk away before I make sure everyone sees exactly what you've been up to with a married woman." Something in Mark's tone told me he meant more than just my reputation. He meant Aaron's job, his family, everything. Aaron looked at me, his eyes searching for some sign I'd choose him. But I couldn't say anything. I just froze. Finally, Aaron stepped back from the window, shaking his head. "You've made your choice." And then he walked into the darkness. Mark closed the window slowly, locked it, and stood there staring at me. "That's the last time I ever want to see him near this house," he said. "If it happens again, the file goes public." No warnings. I wanted to scream, cry, something, but instead I just nodded. Over the next few days, I sank into a strange numbness. Aaron stopped calling. Mark acted almost normal again, too normal. He'd bring me coffee in the mornings, kiss me on the cheek before leaving for work, even joke with me during dinner like we were back to being a happy family. But every smile felt like a leash tightening. Then, one evening, I found something that changed everything. I was in Mark's home office, looking for a stapler, when I opened a desk drawer and saw a black USB drive. It had a small label, "Backups." Curiosity, or maybe desperation, got the better of me. I plugged it into the computer. There they were. All the photos, all the recordings, every file he'd used to control me and more. There were folders with names I didn't recognize, dates going back before my affair with Aaron. Other women. At first, I thought maybe they were old work files, something from a private investigator case, or a side job I didn't know about. But the deeper I looked, the clearer it became. These weren't random women. These were women Mark knew. Some were co-workers from his old job. One I recognized as a neighbor who'd moved away 2 years ago. Another was my friend from the PTO, Lisa. Each folder was like a meticulously curated dossier: photos, phone call recordings, copies of emails, even GPS logs. Some of the pictures were intimate, taken without the women knowing. Others were screenshots of private messages, some of them flirty, some of them clearly affairs of their own. My hands were shaking as I clicked through them. That's when I saw a folder with my own name. Inside were not just the files I knew about from my time with Aaron, but things going back years. Texts I'd sent to friends, phone calls with my sister, receipts from online purchases, even photos of me in my own home, clearly taken with some kind of hidden camera. I felt sick. This wasn't about my affair, it was about control. Mark had been collecting leverage on everyone in his orbit for years. The front door opened downstairs. My heart lurched. I yanked the USB drive from the computer, shoving it into my pocket just as his footsteps started up the stairs. He appeared in the doorway, smiling like nothing was wrong. "Find what you were looking for." I forced my voice to stay steady. "Yeah, just the stapler." But all I could think about was the drive burning in my pocket, and the fact that I was now holding something that could destroy not just me, but him. That night, I barely slept. My mind raced with possibilities. If I went to the police, would they even believe me? If I confronted him, would he just tighten the leash further? And then there was the dangerous thought I couldn't shake. I could use this against him, the way he used my affair against me. The next morning, I made a decision. I texted Aaron, "I need to see you. Urgently." Aaron replied almost instantly. "Where? When?" I told him to meet me at a small diner about 40 minutes away, a place Mark would never think to check. I left the house under the excuse of running errands for the kids, making sure to take the old car, without the GPS tracker. When I walked into the diner, Aaron was already in a corner booth, his baseball cap pulled low. The moment our eyes met, all the tension of the last few weeks hit me like a punch. I slid into the booth and didn't waste time. "Mark's been spying on more people than just me," I said quietly. "I have proof. Photos, recordings, files on multiple women." Aaron leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying he's dangerous. And I'm saying we might be able to use this to get out from under him, for good." He listened as I explained about the USB drive, the hidden folders, the years of surveillance. His expression shifted from shock to something sharper, almost predatory. "If that's true, he's broken a dozen laws. We could take it to the cops." "Whoa." He hesitated. "We could make sure he never breathes a word about you again." "What do you mean?" I asked, though I already knew. Aaron smirked faintly. "Blackmail works both ways, Claire." Part of me recoiled. I hated what this had turned into, hated that my life had become some twisted chess match. But the other part, the part that was tired of being afraid, was tempted. We spent the next hour going over possibilities. If I confronted Mark directly, he'd just threaten to release my affair details again. If we went to the police, he might destroy the files before they could act. But if Aaron got his hands on the USB drive, we could copy everything and keep it as insurance. The problem was the drive never left Mark's office for long. "I can get in there again," I said finally, "but I'll need a distraction." Aaron's eyes lit up. "Leave that to me." As I left the diner, I felt a mix of fear and adrenaline coursing through me. For the first time since this nightmare started, I wasn't just reacting, I was planning. What I didn't realize was that Mark was already 3 steps ahead. 2 nights later, Aaron put the plan into motion. He would, accidentally, run into Mark at his favorite bar downtown, start an argument about me, and keep him occupied just long enough for me to slip into the home office, grab the USB, and get out. It was risky, but it was the only shot we had. At 7:42 p.m. Aaron texted, "He's here. I'm buying him a drink now." I waited 5 minutes, then crept into the office. My heart was hammering so hard I could hear it in my ears. The desk drawer opened easily, but the USB wasn't there. My stomach dropped. I began searching everywhere, behind books, inside envelopes, under the desk. And then I saw it, the USB drive sitting right in the middle of the desk, in plain sight. Something about it felt wrong. Mark never left it out. Still, I told myself it was my only chance. I grabbed it, shoved it into my pocket, and turned to leave, only to hear the front door slam shut. Mark's voice echoed through the hallway. "Claire, we need to talk." I froze. He wasn't supposed to be here. Aaron was supposed to keep him busy for at least another hour. Mark stepped into the office, closing the door behind him. His eyes flicked to my pocket. "You've been busy." I tried to play dumb. "I was just looking for." "Don't," he said sharply. "I know Aaron's been in touch. I know you met him, and I know you think you're going to use what's on that drive against me." My throat went dry. "How?" He cut me off with a humorless smile. "Because I let you." He pointed toward the ceiling, and for the first time, I noticed the faint glint of a camera lens above the bookshelf. "That drive," he continued, "it's a decoy. The real one's in a safe you'll never find. But now I have video of you stealing from me, conspiring with your boyfriend, and violating the agreement you signed. Which means..." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I own you completely." I felt the walls closing in. I'd thought I was taking back control, but I'd walked right into his trap. And then Mark said something that chilled me more than anything else. "You're going to help me with something, Claire. And if you do it well, maybe I'll let you keep your life as it is. If you don't..." His smile widened. Everyone gets a show. Mark didn't explain right away. He just walked over to his desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out a manila folder. He slid it toward me, like it was some kind of business deal. Inside were printed photos of a woman I didn't recognize, mid-30s, dark hair, always looking over her shoulder like she was being followed. There were also screenshots of emails, a copy of what looked like a bank statement, and a grainy image of her getting into a car late at night. Who is she? I asked. A problem, Mark said simply. One that needs to be removed. I stared at him. What do you mean, removed? Don't be dramatic. I'm not talking about killing anyone, he said, smirking. But she's been causing trouble for someone I do business with. I need you to get close to her, find out what she knows, and make it go away. You're good at getting people to trust you, Claire. You've had plenty of practice. I felt sick. Why me? Because you owe me, he said flatly. And because if you refuse, I send everything I have to your family, the school board, the church, the PTA, everyone. Your kids will grow up knowing exactly what their mother is. I tried to think of a way out, but my mind was blank. Mark wasn't asking, he was commanding, and he had all the leverage in the world. When do I start? I asked quietly. Tomorrow, he said. And don't worry, I'll tell you exactly what to say and do. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, the USB decoy still sitting on the desk downstairs. My affair with Aaron had started as an escape, but now I was trapped in something far darker, something I didn't fully understand. And the worst part, a small, dangerous part of me was starting to wonder just how far Mark's web of secrets really went, and if I could survive inside it long enough to turn the tables. The next morning, Mark handed me a small envelope before I even had my coffee. Inside was a prepaid phone, a photo of the woman from the folder, and a slip of paper with an address. Her name's Julia West, he said. She works at a wellness clinic. I've already booked you an appointment for a consultation this afternoon. Go there, talk to her, get her to trust you. I'll tell you what to ask once you've made contact. I felt like my stomach was tied in knots. And what exactly am I supposed to find out? You'll know when I tell you, he said. And then, in that infuriatingly calm voice, smile, Claire. You're good at pretending. The clinic was in a quiet strip mall, the kind of place you'd never notice unless you were looking for it. I walked in, rehearsing the fake name Mark had given me, Sarah Collins. Julia was at the front desk. She looked exactly like her photo, but in person there was something softer about her, almost vulnerable. She greeted me warmly, asked me to fill out a form, and led me into a small consultation room. We made small talk at first, about wellness, stress, life balance. But then something unexpected happened. Halfway through the session, Julia glanced toward the door, lowered her voice, and said, "You don't have to tell me the truth, but you're not here for health advice, are you?" I froze. What makes you say that? She gave me a sad smile. Because I've seen that look before. You're scared of someone. My pulse quickened. And you'd know that how? Julia leaned back in her chair. Because I've been in your shoes. A long time ago, I had a husband who liked to collect information about people. Use it to get what he wanted. He didn't stop until someone stopped him. Something in her tone made my skin prickle. What happened to him? Her eyes met mine, steady and unblinking. He's still out there, and I think your husband works with him. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Mark had told me she was a problem for his business associate. But what if she wasn't the enemy? What if she was exactly the person I needed? Julia reached into her desk drawer and slid me a business card. On the back, in neat handwriting, it said, "If you want out, I can help you. Don't tell him we talked." I slipped it into my pocket just as my prepaid phone buzzed with a text from Mark. "Well, did you get what I asked for?" I stared at my phone for a long time after hanging up with him. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was something sharper. I hated that he thought he still owned me, that he could call me like nothing had happened, issue a command, and expect me to obey. But I also knew ignoring him wasn't an option. Mark didn't just make threats, he made them happen. 2 days later, I was sitting in the corner of a small, dimly lit coffee shop on the edge of town. The place smelled of burnt espresso and old wood, the kind of place people came to disappear. I kept scanning the door, my heart pounding every time it creaked open. Then she walked in, tall, dark hair pulled into a loose knot, wearing a long coat that almost hid her entirely. Her eyes swept the room, and when they landed on me, she froze for a fraction of a second, long enough for me to feel it in my bones. She slid into the seat across from me, without saying a word at first. Up close, I noticed the faint bruise near her jaw, barely covered by makeup. We just looked at each other, the silence stretching, like we were both measuring the other's intentions. "You're Emily?" she asked finally. Her voice was soft, but it carried something heavy. I nodded. She let out a small laugh, bitter and sad at the same time. "Of course. You look exactly like I imagined. I frowned. What does that mean? She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded photograph. It was me. Candid shot, at the grocery store, holding a basket, completely unaware. I've known about you for years, she said quietly. Mark, he made sure I did. The coffee in my hand suddenly felt like ice. How do you know him? I asked, though my gut already knew the answer. She smiled, but it wasn't warm. I'm his wife. The words hit like a punch. Not ex-wife. Not former girlfriend. Wife. I gripped the table to keep from shaking. Mark had been living two full lives at the same time. One with me, one with her. Only now did I realize, we weren't enemies. We were both prisoners. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The hum of the espresso machine and the faint clinking of cups filled the air, but it felt like the world had gone silent around us. Her hands trembled slightly as she took a sip of coffee. I didn't come here to fight you, she said finally. If anything, I came to warn you. I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. Warn me? About what? Mark had already burned my life down. What else could he possibly take? He's getting desperate, she continued, glancing toward the window like she expected him to appear at any moment. The money he's been throwing around, it's not his. It's never been his. And now the people he owes are starting to get impatient. I stared at her. You mean loan sharks? She shook her head slowly. Worse. Something about the way she said it made my stomach knot. It wasn't just fear. It was the kind of dread that told me we were talking about people who didn't leave witnesses. And now, she said, leaning in closer, he's using you as leverage. My pulse spiked. Leverage for what? She hesitated, then pulled out her phone. The screen showed a string of messages from an unknown number, photos of me, my apartment building, my car, even one of me unlocking my front door. He sent these to me last week, she said. Said if I didn't help him get what he wants, something might happen to you. I felt the blood drain from my face. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but she grabbed my wrist before I could move. Listen to me. We can stop him, but you have to trust me. We have to move before he does. Her grip was cold, but her eyes burned with something I hadn't expected, determination. I wasn't sure if I could trust her, but I knew one thing. If I didn't act now, there might not be a later. I pulled my hand back slowly, my mind racing. Every rational part of me screamed that I should walk away, call the police, change my number, disappear if I had to. But then I remembered those photos, the way they'd been taken from angles I didn't even notice. Someone had been close, watching. All right, I said finally, my voice quieter than I intended. What's your plan? She exhaled, like she'd been holding her breath for hours. It's risky, she said, but if it works, Mark will have no choice but to disappear. And not the kind of disappearing where he comes back in 6 months. The kind where no one hears from him again. I swallowed hard. You're talking about killing him. She shook her head sharply. No, I'm talking about something worse for someone like him. Destroying him. Taking away the only thing that matters to him. Control. The way she said it sent a chill down my spine. Her plan was simple on paper, but dangerous in execution. Mark had a safe house, a small storage unit he treated like his personal vault. Cash, documents, hard drives, evidence of every dirty deal he'd ever made. If we got into that unit and handed the contents to the right people, Mark's world would implode overnight. The catch. The keycard to that unit was always on him, and he never let it out of his sight. That's where you come in, she said, locking eyes with me. You're the only one he still thinks he has under his thumb. If you can get close enough, you can take it. I leaned back, feeling my heart hammer in my chest. It wasn't just the risk of being caught. If Mark even suspected I was plotting against him, those threats in the photos would become reality. But a strange thing happened as I sat there, staring into her cold, steady gaze. I realized I wanted to do it, not just to protect myself, not just to stop him. I wanted to see him fall. The first step was getting invited back into Mark's orbit. That wasn't hard. He always liked keeping people he could manipulate close. I just had to make it seem like I'd come crawling back, tail between my legs. 2 days later, I found myself sitting across from him, in a dimly lit bar he used as his unofficial office. He looked the same, impeccably dressed, watch gleaming, that smug half-smile he wore like a crown. If anything, the sight of him made my stomach twist, harder than it had in months. Well, look who decided to come home, he said, leaning back with his drink. I knew you'd realize you're nothing without me. I forced a weak smile, the kind I'd perfected over years of pretending. I just got tired of the drama, I said softly. I want things to go back to the way they were. He bought it. At least, enough to let me sit there for over an hour while he talked about his newest ventures, none of which I cared about, until finally, I saw it. The key card. It was in his inner jacket pocket. He'd pulled it halfway out to show off the expensive leather wallet it was tucked beside before sliding it back in. I needed to get close enough to take it without him noticing. The opportunity came when a waitress spilled a drink near us, soaking part of the table. Mark stood, muttering, and slipped off his jacket, hanging it on the back of his chair. My pulse roared in my ears. One wrong move, and I was done. I reached down, pretending to pick up a napkin. My fingers brushed the inside pocket, smooth leather, cold plastic. I gripped the card gently, sliding it free, and then his voice cut through the air. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" The entire bar seemed to go silent. I froze, my hand still hovering near his jacket. Think. I dropped my earring, I said quickly, holding up a small stud I'd palmed earlier from my bag. "It must be rolled under your chair." His eyes narrowed, scanning me for a crack in the story. After a long pause, he smirked. Still clumsy as ever. He sat back down, and I could finally breathe again, keycard tucked safely in my fist. That night, I followed the plan. Mark was at his business meeting, which I knew was just code for another one of his scams. I used the keycard to get into his storage unit, my hands shaking as I lifted the heavy metal door. Inside were boxes. So many boxes. Stacks of cash wrapped in rubber bands, hard drives, fake IDs, burner phones. Evidence that could put him away for years. I took photos of everything, then loaded what I could into a duffel bag. It was more money than I'd ever seen in my life, and I knew keeping it meant becoming someone different, someone who'd stop running and start surviving. When I walked out, I didn't go home. I didn't even go back to the city. I drove straight to the state line, my phone turned off, my name erased from every account. 3 weeks later, the news broke. Local businessman arrested in multi-million-dollar fraud scheme. The mugshot showed a very different Mark, angry, unshaven, humiliated. I didn't smile when I saw it, but I did take another sip of coffee in my small, quiet apartment 2 states away, the duffel bag tucked safely in my closet. Sometimes, survival isn't about being stronger, it's about being patient enough to strike when it matters most. And I'd waited long enough.